Welcome back to Prep for Retirement TV. I'm your host, Cheryl Tan. I'm with Patrick Moriarty, and today we're talking about retirement planning. So we've already talked about the 3 phases of retirement planning. We've talked about having a written plan and the importance of having that. And now we want to talk about a hot topic, annuities. So very simply, Patrick, let's talk about what an annuity is.
Okay. Well, the dictionary definition of an annuity is a contract between an individual and an insurance company where the individual invests or gives money to the insurance company, and the insurance company in return pays a lifetime income to that individual, or the insurance company gives them guaranteed growth. So it can either be a growth contract or an income contract, but both are guaranteed.
On the surface, it sounds simple.
Yes.
But there are definitely 2 sides that people are fighting around annuities.
100%. You know, it's very, very polarizing. You know, it's kind of like the political environment we're in right now, right? It's very extreme on both ends. I think if you Google annuities, you'll find a lot of negative information, but you'll see a lot of positive information as well. You know, and I like to give, examples, really a real life example of what an annuity is. Social Security. I mean, think about what Social Security is. It's a guaranteed lifetime income payment from the federal government that lasts as long as we do. We all like that, right? We love our Social Security checks. The second example of an annuity is a pension, right? If it's from a publicly traded company or if it's from the federal government, it's a lifetime income check that we can't outlive. It's guaranteed. And we love pensions. Those are great vehicles and things that we use for our retirement plan. So it's interesting that annuities get a lot of bad rap, but we're using them, and people love Social Security and they love pensions. They're used a lot when people really understand them. And here's I like to use another example when it comes to annuities. And this is a personal example. My father worked for CBS News in Washington for 25 years. And when he retired, he got a pension check from CBS News. And seeing as I was his, financial advisor, I knew all of his information, and I knew that check literally came from CBS. But about 10 years into his retirement, the check still came. There was no difference in the dollar amount, but it didn't come from CBS anymore. It came from MetLife. And that's because CBS, not only did they stop giving pensions to new employees, but they wanted to get out of the pension game forever. They didn't want to even pay the retirees. So they took their pension plan and they sold it to MetLife. And now MetLife manages those assets, and basically they just created a giant annuity for all of the CBS employees. So, the check still comes in, but it's from MetLife. So annuities, they work.
So even though we may not understand it completely or
Right.
even want to purchase one,
Right.
it's still a part of our lives.
100%.
Sure.
I mean, they're being used more and more. Again, they're very, very polarizing. Some advisors out there, they hate them, right? There's no use for an annuity in a plan. Some advisors love them, and that's all they like to use. And I think that there's more of a middle ground. It's not a be-all, end-all. I don't think it's the answer for everybody. There's a place for it in the planning process. And if you're a fiduciary, as I am, you're always trying to do what's right for the client. It's your job to do what's right for the client. And if it's right for the client to have an annuity, you use an annuity. It's kind of that simple. So if you're doing what's right, if you're doing proper planning, an annuity might be a solution to someone's problems and issues in retirement.
So I think you mentioned being a fiduciary, and can you explain a little bit more about what that means?
Sure. Being a fiduciary, it's your right, it's your duty, it's the law that you are always finding what's right for the client. You're always doing what's best for the client, not what's best for me, the advisor, or the company. It's always looking out for the client. And again, sometimes it means including an annuity, sometimes it doesn't include that. So when an advisor who's in a fiduciary doesn't include certain types of investment strategies, I don't think they're doing justice.
It's interesting when you said, too, you could have 2 clients two different situations, and maybe one, an annuity might work for, another one, definitely not.
Exactly.
So can you talk about maybe an example where you've seen that work or not?
Sure. If we're going to use an example of annuities and how they work, I'd like to use my personal situation. My wife and I, 4 or 5 years ago, recently had that talk. And the talk was the retirement talk. And not that I'm anywhere near close to retirement, nor is my wife, but we really had to sit down and say, well, what is it going to look like down the road? Our retirement is really simple. You know, it's probably a lot like 75% of the Americans out there. We will have 2 Social Security checks and the pile of money that we accumulate while we're working. It's pretty simple, right? But it's also kind of scary. Because what happens if I pass away? My Social Security check goes away, and then my wife is left with 1 Social Security check and then all this money. But this money can go up, it can go down. And I didn't want that left to my wife. I didn't want her to be responsible for just having 1 check and then figuring out the income source from the assets. So I wanted a 3rd check. So we figured, let's look at an annuity. So we took some of my IRA money, we invested it with an insurance company. There's no taxes, there's no penalties, there's no issues moving it from one to the other. And at some point in the future, we're going to call that annuity company and they're going to start sending us a check for retirement. Maybe it's 10 years from now, maybe it's 15 years from now. But when we start receiving that income, that'll be a 3rd check, right? We'll have 2 Social Security checks, we'll have an annuity check, and then we'll have our assets. And if I die early, if I die before my wife, my Social Security check goes away, but that annuity payment still pays for my wife, even though I've passed away and it was my assets. So it pays for my life, my wife's life as well. Now, if we both die early and there's money still in that annuity, those assets go to my children, our children. And so I just didn't want just Social Security and our assets. I wanted a 3rd check. And really what I did was I created our own pension. I took some of our money and created a 3rd check and created our 3rd pension plan for ourselves. It made sense for me. It doesn't make sense for everybody.
No, so that sometime in the future, no matter what, a check is coming in. So that's 100%. What you've created.
100%, correct. Yeah.
As you said, it's not for everybody, but somebody would like to probably ask questions and get answers. So where can they go for that?
Sure, they can call our local number, and that local number is 410-599-3300. There's 10 spots available this week, 10 appointments. They can grab one of those appointments. We can sit down. There's no cost. There's no obligation. Don't bring a checkbook because we're not selling anything. And we also have a QR code. So you can scan the QR code on the screen, and there you'll actually have access to my calendar. You can grab one of those 10 spots and sit down and have a no-pressure conversation about annuities and see if they're right for you.
Patrick, you've been so helpful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your knowledge. We've got 3 more topics coming up next week, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Yep. We will see you then.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next week.